You people always have an excuse. The words hit the cabin like a lit match. Then came the slap. Flat, sharp, deliberate. The flight attendant's hand was still raised when the silence fell. The kind of silence that swallows a room whole. 30,000 feet in the air. Every passenger frozen. A mother clutching her infant son, her cheek burning red. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She turned her head back slowly, completely, and looked at the woman who had just destroyed her own life without knowing it yet. If you think you know where this is going, you don't. Subscribe, hit that bell, and drop your city below. Let's see how far this story flies. Come with me to my ex's wedding. Amara said it the way people say the most dangerous things, quietly without warning, standing in the kitchen doorway in her coat with her baby already strapped to her chest and one bag already packed by the door. Marcus Ellison looked up from the newspaper. He didn't say what. He didn't say excuse me. He didn't blink twice or tilt his head or do any of the things a normal man would do when his wife asked him to walk into the wedding of the man who once threw her away like she was a bad investment. He just looked at her 4 seconds. She counted. She always counted with Marcus because with him, the seconds were a language. 2 seconds meant no. 3 meant he was deciding. 4 meant something real was happening behind his eyes, something he wasn't going to explain but wasn't going to refuse. 4 seconds. What time is the flight? He said. Steam. She had not expected it to be that simple. Nothing about Marcus was ever supposed to be simple. He was the kind of man that entire rooms adjusted themselves around, not because he demanded it, but because the air around him seemed to understand instinctively that he was not a man you crowded. He had built 3 companies before 40. He had sat across from senators, across from board members who sweated through their shirts, across from rivals who had tried to break him and left the table smaller than when they sat down. And he had agreed 4 seconds flat to walk into David Renner's wedding on a Saturday morning in October. Amara had stood there for a moment, Isaiah's small fist curled around her finger, and thought, this man is going to destroy me, and I am not going to survive it, and I chose this. And then she picked up her bag, and they went to the airport. The gate was crowded. Isaiah was drowsy against her chest, that soft, boneless weight of a baby almost asleep. The kind that makes everything else feel manageable and tender and temporary. Marcus walked beside her. No entourage, no assistant, just him in a dark coat, unremarkable to anyone who didn't look carefully. Most people didn't look carefully. The gate agent did. The woman's eyes moved from Amara to Marcus, paused, and then did that particular thing, that flicker, where recognition arrives before the name does. Like seeing a landmark from an unexpected angle and knowing you know it before you can say why. Marcus didn't acknowledge it. He never did. Amara shifted Isaiah to her other arm and thought about David, about the coffee shop 4 years ago, about the word he had chosen, complicated, as if she were a math problem he'd attempted twice and decided wasn't worth the time. She thought about who she had been then. She thought about who she was now. She lifted her chin and walked through the gate. Seats 2A and 2B. First class. The cabin smelled like recycled air and expensive cologne, and the particular tension of people pretending not to watch each other. Amara settled. Isaiah was almost fully asleep now, his little chest rising and falling against hers, his fingers still wrapped around hers, the way they always were when the world got too big. Marcus sat beside her. He did not open a newspaper. He did not take out his phone. He simply sat the way he always sat, perfectly still, perfectly present, like a man who had long ago stopped needing distractions from his own thoughts. You're not going to ask me about it, Amara said. About what? About why? About David. A beat. You told me why. I told you I needed to close a door. That's a reason. She looked at him. Most men would have more questions. I'm not most men. He turned his head toward her just slightly. And you're not someone who does things without knowing why she's doing them. A pause. I trust you. She felt those 2 words land somewhere in her chest and stay there. She looked back down at Isaiah and didn't say anything else. She appeared without announcement. Pressed uniform, measured steps, the kind of practiced efficiency that had long ago become something else, something that needed things to go a certain way and didn't process it well when they didn't. Claire Ramsey stopped at row 2. Her eyes moved to Amara. Stayed. Ma'am? Not a greeting, a management tool. Infants in first class must be secured during taxiing. Amara looked up. We haven't started taxiing. Nevertheless, I'll secure him when it's required. I'd prefer you do it now. There was a way certain people said I'd prefer that had nothing to do with preference. It was a command wearing a costume. Amara had heard it her whole life from teachers, from bosses, from men in expensive ties, who looked at her like she was an interruption in a room they owned. She recognized the costume. She didn't move. He's asleep, Amara said. If I move him, he'll wake up. You don't want him to wake up. Something shifted in Claire's expression. Not anger yet, something drier, inconvenienced. There have also been concerns from other passengers. About what? Amara's voice was still perfectly level. About potential disruption. From a sleeping infant. Potentially disruptive, Claire said, preemptively. He hasn't made a sound. Ma'am, has a passenger complained? Amara asked. Specifically to you, about my son. Claire's chin lifted. I am managing the comfort of this entire cabin. Then I'll ask you again, has anyone complained? The pause was exactly 1 second too long. That's what I thought, Amara said and looked back down at Isaiah. Claire didn't leave. That was the first sign. A professional, a person secure in the authority their position gave them would have moved on, would have smoothed the moment over and returned to the galley and let it sit. Instead, Claire Ramsey stood at the end of row 2, and the longer she stood there, the more the moment began to have a shape. The man in 3A had noticed. Silver watch gray suit, the kind of man who'd attended enough boardrooms to read a room by reflex. He'd gone very still over his coffee. The woman across the aisle, late 60s, reading glasses. The quiet authority of someone's beloved grandmother or someone's very sharp attorney had looked up from her book and not looked back down. Claire leaned in. I want to make something clear, she said. Quietly, pointed. This is a premium cabin. The passengers in this section expect a certain standard. I would appreciate your cooperation in maintaining it. Amara looked at her for a long moment. What is your name? She said. Claire blinked. I'm sorry. Your name. Your badge says Claire. Is that right? Yes. Claire. Amara's voice was steady as a table. I have cooperated with every reasonable request you've made. What you're doing right now is not about my son. So I'm going to ask you directly, is there a problem? A real one? Claire's eyes moved quickly over Amara, over Isaiah, over the seat, over Marcus. And then something happened that Amara would never forget because it was so deliberate, so unmasked. Claire Ramsey leaned down, dropped her voice to a register just above a whisper, and said, You people always have an excuse. The cabin heard it, every word. The man in 3A straightened in his seat. The woman across the aisle put her book down completely. Amara's head came up. Say that again, she said. Her voice was so quiet it was almost nothing. The kind of quiet that is the opposite of nothing. Claire must have seen something in her face. She must have registered somewhere in the part of the brain that still handles survival that she had gone somewhere she couldn't come back from. That the woman sitting in seat 2A was not flinching, not crumbling, not looking away. But Claire Ramsey had built her entire sense of self on never being the one who stepped back. So she didn't step back. What happened next lasted less than 1 second. Later, the passengers would disagree on whether it was intentional. The man in 3A would say it was deliberate that he saw the shoulder drop, the arm move, the wrist turn. The woman across the aisle would say she couldn't be certain. The young man in 1B who had removed his headphones would say he didn't see the setup, only the result. The result was a sound, flat, precise, the sound of a hand making contact with a human face. Isaiah startled awake with a single sharp cry and then went silent, wide-eyed, staring up at his mother with the open, trusting terror of a child who doesn't understand what just happened, but knows that something in his world has changed. The entire cabin froze. Claire Ramsey stood there, hands still partly raised, expression moving through its stages, shock at herself. Rapid calculation, then, because she was exactly who she was, something that looked almost like defiance, like she was daring someone to say something. Amara turned her head back. The slowness of it was what silenced the room. She turned her face back to Claire Ramsey, and her expression was the most frightening thing any of them had ever seen, because it wasn't rage, and it wasn't tears, and it wasn't the crumbling they might have expected. It was arrival. The face of a woman who had been building to a decision for a long time and had just in this exact moment arrived at it. You just made a mistake, Amar said. The biggest one of your life. Claire opened her mouth. I'm going to need you to lower your don't. One word, barely a breath, but it landed like a wall. The man in 3A silver watch gray a suit stood up halfway out of his seat. Excuse me, his voice shook slightly. Did that woman just strike a passenger? I saw it, said the woman across the aisle. Her book was closed, her glasses were off. I saw all of it. The young man in 1B had his phone out. Claire's eyes moved to the phone, back to Amara. Around the cabin, all those faces, all of them turned toward her, none of them with the expression she needed to see. No confusion, no doubt, no benefit given, just witnesses. If you'd all just, she tried to recover her voice. The management tone, the uniform authority. This is a matter between myself and the passenger, and I'll handle. Your hand, said the woman across the aisle, is still raised. Claire looked down. It was. She lowered it, slowly. Her composure was reforming brick by brick, but the bricks were the wrong size now, and everyone could see the gaps. I'll need you to come with me to the rear of the... I'm not going anywhere. Amara's voice was the same temperature it had been since the moment this started. No higher, no lower. I'm sitting with my son. You are going to step back. Ma'am, I am the authority on this. No, said Marcus Ellison. He had not raised his voice. He hadn't needed to. Marcus turned his head toward Claire Ramsey with the full unhurried weight of his attention, and what she saw in his face, whatever it was, stopped her mid-sentence as efficiently as a hand pressed flat against a door. My wife, he said, is holding our son. She's not going anywhere. You are going to step back. Claire blinked at him. The uniform gave her courage she hadn't earned. Sir, I understand you're upset. I'm not upset, he said, completely even, like a line in a contract. I'm informing you. Step back. I am going to need to contact my supervisor. That would be why. He reached into his inside pocket, set a business card on the armrest without looking at it, without looking away from her. When you do have them, call that number. Tell them Marcus Ellison asked them to call. Claire's eyes dropped to the card, came back up, dropped again. Something moved through her face that wasn't emotion exactly. It was more like the sensation of walking into a room and realizing the floor is lower than you thought it was. That sudden body level recalibration. She knew the name. She was staring at the name. Marcus Ellison. Her lips moved without sound for one full second. The man in 3A had gone very still. He looked at Marcus, looked at the card, looked at the name on Claire's badge. His mouth opened slowly. Did you say Ellison? He said. Marcus as in Ellison Air, said the woman across the aisle. Her voice was absolutely quiet. She had put her glasses fully back on and was looking at Marcus like she was reading a headline. That's you own this airline. Nobody breathed. Claire Ramsey looked down at her uniform, at the logo on her left breast pocket, at the name printed on the badge, clipped beneath it. Ellison Air, employee ID CR 7741. The blood left her face so completely that the man in 3A would later tell his wife it was like watching someone's face go transparent, like watching a person understand in real time that the room they had just burned down was the room they lived in. Every aircraft in this fleet, said the man in 3A, slowly more to himself than anyone. Every single one of them is mine, Marcus said. He hadn't moved. He hadn't raised his voice. Yes. Claire Ramsey stood at the end of row 2 and did not move for 4 full seconds. Then she said in a voice that had lost every edge it ever had, I wasn't aware. Of course you weren't, Amar said. Claire looked at her. That's the point, Amar said. You weren't aware because it didn't matter to you. Not who I was, not who he was, not what you were doing. She paused. Let every word land clean and separate. You made a decision about me before you got to this row, didn't you? It wasn't a question. Claire's mouth opened, closed. Step back, Amara said, please. The please was the most devastating thing she could have said. The perfect controlled civility of it, the absolute refusal to become what she'd been pushed to become, landed in that cabin like something irreversible. Claire stepped back, one step, then another. Her heels were silent on the carpet. Her hands were trembling, both of them, and she was pressing them against her sides, like she could make them stop. From 4C, a woman late 60s, silver hair pinned back, began to clap. Alone at first, slow, deliberate, the kind of applause that isn't celebration. It's witness. It's we saw this and we are saying we saw this. 3A joined. Then the woman across the aisle. Then 1B, the young man with the phone who had stopped recording and started clapping. Because some moments demand your hands for something other than documentation. It moved through first class like something that had been waiting to happen. Claire Ramsey turned and walked toward the galley. Her back was straight, her steps were measured. She had the posture of someone determined to maintain dignity through the longest walk of their life. But her hands, still trembling, gave her away to everyone she passed. Amara did not look at the passengers. She looked at Isaiah. He had stopped crying the moment she'd pressed him tighter to her chest, the animal certainty of an infant that his mother's arms were the safest place in any room, in any cabin, at any altitude. He looked up at her now with his wide, dark, uncomplicated eyes and grabbed her thumb. His grip was strong. It always was. She pressed her lips to the top of his head. Once. Twice. "It's okay," she whispered into his hair. "We're okay, baby. We're okay." Marcus's hand came over hers. He didn't say anything. He never needed to. She had learned that about him slowly, the way his silence was never absence. It was presence. The most complete kind. The kind that says, "I am here and I am not leaving, and you don't have to explain it." She had once thought she would never have something like that. She had once been told gently over a coffee table by a man who meant it kindly that her life was too complicated for what he needed. She pressed her hand over Marcus's and looked out the window as the runway began to move beneath them. The engines roared. The ground fell away. Somewhere behind the galley curtain, a phone was being dialed with shaking hands. Somewhere ahead, through clouds already dissolving below them, a church was being decorated with white flowers and satin ribbon, and the quiet, confident certainty of a man who had chosen someone uncomplicated. And here in seat 2A at 30,000 feet rising, Amara Jackson closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. Just 3, and let herself feel every piece of it. The sting in her cheek, the weight of her son, the warmth of the hand covering hers, the sound of people clapping for her in a room that hadn't known her name 5 minutes ago. She let herself feel it. Then she opened her eyes. Because the thing about closing a door, the thing no one tells you is that you have to be willing to walk all the way up to it first. And David Renner was standing at the end of that aisle in 3 hours in a church 3 states away, about to make the biggest promise of his life. He had no idea she was coming. He had no idea who she was coming with. And he had absolutely no idea that in a galley behind a curtain, 30,000 feet in the air, a woman with a company badge and trembling hands had just set something into motion that would reach that church before the first prayer was spoken. Isaiah's fingers tightened around hers. The clouds closed beneath them. Amara lifted her face toward the horizon, and for the first time since she'd packed that single bag in the early morning, she felt something unfold in her chest that she hadn't allowed herself until now. Certainty. She was ready. She had always been ready. She just needed someone to come with her. Behind the galley curtain, Claire Ramsey was not having a breakdown. She was doing something more dangerous than that. She was thinking. Her phone was in her hand. The screen was lit. She had typed 3 different messages to her supervisor, deleted all 3, and was now standing very still, staring at the name on the business card like it might change if she looked at it long enough. It didn't change. Marcus Ellison, Chairman and CEO, Ellison Air Group. She turned the card over. There was nothing on the back. There never was with men like that. They didn't need to fill both sides. Janelle, the other flight attendant working the first-class cabin, stepped into the galley and pulled the curtain closed behind her. She was younger than Claire by about 8 years and had the expression of someone who had watched a building fall and was now trying to figure out the most professional way to discuss the rubble. "Are you?" Janelle started. "I'm fine." "Claire." "I said I'm fine." Claire set the card down on the narrow counter. She straightened her jacket. She moved to the beverage cart open. It began organizing cups that were already organized. "It was a misunderstanding. I'll issue an apology, explain that the physical contact was unintentional, and it wasn't unintentional," Janelle said quietly. Claire's hand stopped on the cups. "The woman in 4C filmed it," Janelle said. "I'm sorry, she caught the whole thing from about 15 seconds before it happened. The whole exchange, what you said." A pause. All of it. The galley was very small. Claire had worked in galleys her entire career and never noticed how small they were until this moment when the walls seemed to be making a decision about her. How much did she get? Claire said. Enough. Claire picked up the business card again. Put it back down. Has she posted it? I don't know yet. Find out. Janelle looked at her for a moment, not with cruelty, not with satisfaction, but with the particular sadness of someone watching a colleague walk off a cliff they'd been warned about. Claire, that's Marcus Ellison sitting in 2B. His wife is in 2A. She stopped, chose the next words carefully. You need to call legal before you do anything else. Not your supervisor. Legal. Claire said nothing. And you need to do it now, Janelle said, before that video goes anywhere. Claire picked up her phone. Her hands were still trembling. She hated that most of all. In seat 2A, Amara felt the plane level off and finally let her shoulders drop. Isaiah had gone fully back to sleep, that deep, absolute infant sleep that looks almost theatrical in its completeness. Limbs, loose mouth, slightly open, entirely surrendered to whatever safety his mother's arms represented. She watched him for a moment. Just watched him breathe. You're still thinking about blood, Marcus said. She looked up. What? Your jaw, he said. You do that thing with your jaw when you're still processing something. She unclenched her jaw. She hadn't known she was doing it. I'm fine. I know you are. He looked at her steadily. That's not what I said. She exhaled, slow. She called me you people. I know. In front of everyone, like it was nothing, she stopped. Her voice had stayed level, but something underneath it hadn't. I've been hearing versions of that my whole life, and I am still not another stop. She pressed her lips together. I thought I was past letting it do this to me. It's not a weakness, Marcus said. It feels like one. It's not. He looked at her the way he always looked at her when he meant something completely without qualification, without the softening people usually added when they thought the truth might be too heavy. Feeling it doesn't make you weak. Feeling it and staying in that seat the way you did, that's the opposite of weakness. The man in 3A. His name was Gerald, though no one had asked yet had been facing forward since the applause died down, but his attention had not moved forward. He had spent 35 years in corporate litigation, and he had watched 100 situations begin exactly the way this one had begun. He knew what it looked like. He also knew what it looked like when the other shoe had not yet fallen. He turned slightly in his seat. Excuse me, he said. Amara looked over. Gerald had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. I know it's not my place, but I want you to know what happened back there. I've been on a lot of flights. He cleared his throat. You handled that with more grace than most people I've met in a boardroom. That's not a small thing. Amara looked at him for a moment. Then she said, thank you. If you need a witness statement, he said, I'm Gerald Hartman. I'm an attorney. He produced a card, set it on the armrest between their rows precisely without ceremony. For whatever that's worth, Marcus reached over and took it. It's worth quite a bit, he said. Thank you, Gerald. Gerald nodded, settled back, returned to his coffee with the manner of a man who had said what needed saying and didn't require acknowledgement beyond what he'd received. The woman across the aisle, her name was Constance, and she had been a family court judge for 22 years before retiring, though no one knew that yet either had watched the card exchange with the expression of someone adding information to a file. She said nothing, but she was watching. 40 minutes into the flight, Janelle came out of the galley. Not Claire Chanel. She walked to row 2 with the measured care of someone approaching a situation that required both professionalism and genuine humanity, and that was a narrow space to walk. She stopped beside Amara, clasped her hands in front of her. Mrs. Ellison, she said, I want to apologize on behalf of the crew. What happened was not acceptable. It was not in line with who we are as a company, and I'm deeply sorry that you and your son experienced it. Amara looked at her. Thank you, Janelle. Janelle held her gaze. Is there anything I can get you? Anything at all? We're fine. A small pause. Actually, some water would be nice. Of course. And as Janelle turned to go, Amara said, Is she still on this flight? Janelle stopped. Yes. Is she working? A carefully measured pause. She's been relieved of first-class duties for the remainder of the flight. Okay, Amara said. Thank you. Janelle nodded and went back for the water. Marcus said nothing, but she felt him watching her face with the same attention he gave everything that mattered to him. And she knew the way you know things about someone when you've lived close enough to them to learn the vocabulary of their silences, that he was making decisions. Quietly, the way he always did, like a man doing math in a language no one else could read. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "Nothing you need to worry about today," he said. "Marcus." He looked at her. "Today is about the door, remember." She held his gaze. "Don't let her become the door," he said. She exhaled, looked back down at Isaiah. "You're right. I know." She almost smiled. Almost. 40 rows back in the last row of economy, Claire Ramsey sat with her phone pressed to her ear and her free hand flat on her knee and listened to Ellison Ayre's legal team tell her things she already knew, but had been hoping she didn't. She had already been told by her supervisor, who had been called by the operations director, that she was suspended pending investigation. She had been told this in a tone of voice that made the word suspended sound like a door being locked from the outside. She had been told to remain on the aircraft until it landed, at which point she would be met by HR. Met by HR as if they were doing her a favor. The legal team was not doing her a favor, they were doing themselves a favor. The incident was recorded, the woman on the phone was saying, not unkindly, but with the brisk clarity of someone managing liability. "We've been made aware of footage that captures the full exchange. Our priority is the safety and dignity of our passengers, and in cases where it was unintentional," Claire said. Silence. "The physical contact," Claire said. "It was Ms. Ramsey." The voice on the phone was still even, but there was something in the evenness now that was less patience and more practiced distance. "I would strongly recommend that you not characterize the incident in any way until you've spoken with your own legal representation. Do you have an attorney?" Claire stared at the headrest in front of her. She did not have an attorney. She had never needed an attorney. She had worked for this airline for 11 years. She had won 3 Service Excellence Awards. She had trained new hires. She had flown the Paris route, the London route. She had been in this uniform since she was 29 years old. "No," she said. "Then I'd advise you to get one before we sit down together. We'll be in touch when you land." The call ended. Claire put the phone in her lap and looked at her own hands. The hands she had pressed together to stop the trembling. The hands that had done what they had done in that cabin, and for the first time since seat 2A, she didn't think about Amara Jackson. She thought about herself. She thought about what she had built over 11 years and what it had felt like when she walked that aisle. The authority of it, the ownership of it, the way people adjusted themselves to her, moved their bags, lowered their voices, nodded when she explained the rules. She thought about the way she had looked at that woman in seat 2A and made a decision. She thought about the words she had used, "you people." She pressed her palms harder together. She had said it like it was nothing, like it was a reflex, not a choice. But those 2 words had a history she hadn't invented and hadn't earned and had chosen to carry anyway. And she had deployed them in a first-class cabin at 30,000 feet against a woman holding an infant. And she had stood there afterward, without apology, with that expression on her face that the camera in 4C had caught in its entirety. She knew it was on video because she had felt herself doing it. The defiance, the dare them expression, the face of a woman who had expected there to be no consequence. She closed her eyes. In seat 4C, the woman who had filmed it, her name was Priya, 34 years old, traveling home from a conference, was staring at the number in the corner of her screen. 47,000 views. She had posted it 22 minutes ago. She checked again. 61,000. Her hands were shaking in a completely different way than Claire's. Her hands were shaking because she had not expected this. She had filmed it because it felt wrong not to, because there are moments when you realize your phone is the only witness that can't be dismissed, and you point it at the truth without knowing what the truth will become. She had not expected 61,000 people to decide that truth needed watching. She had not expected the comments. "That woman is incredible. That restraint. My God," she never raised her voice. "Not once. Who is she?" "Flight attendant put on leave. The whole airline belongs to her husband. No way." "Wait." Ellison Ayre, that Ellison Priya, looked out the window, looked back at her phone. 83,000. She quietly put her phone face down on her tray table, pressed her hands flat over it, and stared at the seat back in front of her. She had opened something. She didn't know yet how wide it was going to get. Amara didn't know about the video. She was thinking about David. Not with regret, she had burned that particular fuel out years ago, and there was nothing left in that tank but fumes. She was thinking about something specific. She was thinking about the morning about 2 years into what she had believed was a real relationship when she had told David something true about herself. Something that took courage to say. Something she had been carrying quietly, the way she carried most things, her mother's illness, her student loans, the job she'd lost at 26 and spent 18 months recovering from. She had told him. She had opened a door she didn't open for many people. He had held her hand across the table. He had said, "I'm so sorry, that sounds really hard." And then 3 weeks later over coffee, he had said complicated. As if the things that were hard about her life were the same as the things that were wrong with her. As if difficulty meant defect. She had packed her apartment in 4 days and not cried until she was completely alone in her car at a gas station in the rain, and even then she had kept it to 12 minutes because she had somewhere to be. Isaiah made a sound in his sleep, something small and satisfied. She looked down at him, and the David thoughts dissolved. This was what had replaced them. Not Marcus, not only Marcus, but this specific gravity, this specific weight in her arms that made everything before it feel like a preamble to a story that had only just started. She had been terrified when she found out she was pregnant. She had sat in Marcus's kitchen with the test in her hand and waited for the fear to be the biggest thing in the room. It wasn't. The biggest thing in the room had been Marcus's face when she told him. Not performance, not practiced reaction. Just a man looking at news that had changed the arrangement of everything he thought his life was and deciding in real time that the new arrangement was better. "We figure it out," he had said. "Together. That's all." She had thought at the time it was too simple. She knew now that the simple things were the ones that held. She was almost asleep herself. Isaiah's warmth against her chest and the hum of the engines and the strange calm that had settled after the storm when Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His expression didn't change. But she had learned his face the way you learn a landscape you live inside, and something in the stillness of his jaw told her the buzz had mattered. "What?" she said. He turned the phone toward her. The video had a thumbnail. Her own face, her own profile captured in the moment before she turned her head back. 60-degree lighting from the cabin overhead. The frame was slightly shaky, the way real things are. The number in the corner read 247,000. She stared at it. "It's been posted 26 minutes, Marcus said. She couldn't speak for a moment. "It's going," he said. Not "it's gone," going. Present tense, active, like watching something move through the world in real time and understanding that it would not be stopped. "I didn't," she started. "I don't want, I know. This isn't Marcus. I didn't come on this trip to Amara." His voice was steady, grounding. "You didn't do this. You sat in a seat and comforted your son. Someone else did everything that led to this moment." He held her gaze. "All you did was refuse to disappear. That's it." She looked back at the phone, at her own face frozen in that frame, at the number still climbing. 312,000. She pressed her face into the top of Isaiah's head and breathed. Behind her, 14 rows back, Gerald Hartman had his own phone out. He had found the video 30 seconds ago through a legal colleague's forwarded message. He read the comment thread for 45 seconds, closed the app, opened his email, wrote 3 sentences to his law partner, "Flying with the Ellisons right now. Witness the full incident. Keep tomorrow morning clear." He sent it and put his phone away and settled back in his seat with the expression of a man watching history move through a room he happened to be sitting in, grateful for the first time in a long career that he had given someone his card. In the back of the aircraft, Claire Ramsey had not checked social media. She would later say that she simply hadn't thought to. She would be lying. She hadn't checked because somewhere under the calculation, under the composure, she was rebuilding brick by broken brick she already knew. The way you know when you've knocked something over in the dark, you don't need to turn the light on to understand that something is broken. She knew. The seatbelt sign chimed. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, the measured weatherproof calm of someone trained to make bad news sound like a weather report. "Turbulence ahead. Please remain seated." Claire looked up at the small, round light above her. She thought about her locker, her lunch bag inside it, the photograph she'd taped to the door, the one from Paris Route 46 3 years ago, when she had believed that the life she was living was the life she deserved. She thought about what the legal team had said. She thought about what the legal team had not said, which was the part that mattered. They had not said this will be okay. The turbulence came suddenly, the cabin shuddering once hard, and a child somewhere in economy cried out, and then the shudder passed and the air went smooth again, and the world returned to its forward momentum. Amara felt the shudder and tightened her arms around Isaiah, and then relaxed when it was over. Marcus was already looking at her. "We're fine," she said. "I know," he said, and he believed her. What neither of them knew, what no one on the aircraft knew yet, was that the person who had posted the video had also in the same comment thread answered a question someone had asked about the identity of the woman in 2A. "Does anyone know who she is?" Priya in seat 4C had answered without fully thinking about what she was doing. "I heard the man next to her say his name, Marcus Ellison. He owns the airline." 3 words had done the rest. His wife, 2A. The internet, which moves faster than turbulence and does not smooth over, had taken those 3 words and done what it always did with a story about a woman who refused to be made small. It spread it, not in the way of gossip, in the way of recognition, in the way that happens when people see something true about a thing they've been carrying quietly for a long time and find it reflected back at them in someone else's stillness. The comments were not cruel. They were something more powerful than cruel. They were, "I know her, I am her. I have sat in that seat. 480,000. The plane flew on. Isaiah slept. And somewhere 3 states away in a church draped with white and satin and the careful optimism of a man who had once chosen sample over real a florist was taping the last ribbon to the last pew. He didn't know what was coming down the aisle. The plane landed at 11:47 in the morning. Amara knew because she had been watching the time for the last 40 minutes, the way you watch something you can't stop and can't speed up with the particular patience of a person who has already made peace with the fact that the next hour is going to cost them something. She didn't know what yet. She just knew the price hadn't been named. Isaiah had slept through the descent and woke up only when the wheels hit the runway, jolting once hard the way landings sometimes do when the ground reminds you it exists. He didn't cry. He looked up at Amara with those wide, dark, certain eyes and made the small sound he always made when the world interrupted his sleep, not protest, just acknowledgement. "I feel that. I'm still here." "Me too," she whispered to him. Marcus was already on his phone before the seatbelt sign went off. Not frantically, Marcus did nothing frantically, but with the steady, purposeful efficiency of a man who had been managing a situation in his head for 2 hours and was now ready to manage it out loud. She caught fragments. "Legal. Yes, I saw it. Have Donovan call me directly." Not through the board directly. He kept his voice low not for her benefit, but because Marcus Ellison did not perform his power. He exercised it the way lungs exercise breathing. Quietly, without announcement. Gerald Hartman in 3A was already standing. He had his jacket on and his briefcase retrieved before the seatbelt sign finished its chime. He looked over at Amara as the cabin began to shift and fill with the noise of people reclaiming their lives from the overhead compartments. "Safe travels," he said, and then more quietly, "Take care of yourself. What you did today mattered." Amara met his eyes. "Thank you, Gerald." He nodded once, the kind of nod that doesn't need anything added, and moved toward the front of the aircraft. Constance across the aisle stood and collected her things with the unhurried economy of a woman who had spent decades in rooms where waiting was not wasted. She paused before stepping into the aisle and looked at Amara directly. "I've seen a lot of women in a lot of difficult moments," she said. Her voice was dry and warm at the same time, the way Goodwood is. "You are going to be fine. I want you to know that I mean that literally, not politely." Amara felt something loosen in her chest that she hadn't known was tight. "Thank you." "And that baby," Constance added, glancing at Isaiah with something soft and absolute in her expression, "is going to know exactly who his mother is. That matters more than any of this." She stepped into the aisle and was gone. Amara sat for a moment after the words settled. Isaiah looked up at her. She pressed her nose to his forehead and breathed him in that specific warmth, that smell that existed nowhere else in the world, and let herself have the 3 seconds it took to feel held by something that had nothing to do with airports or cameras or the name on a business card. Then she stood up. Marcus ended his call, stood beside her, took the diaper bag from the overhead without being asked. They walked off the plane. At the jetway door, two men in suits were waiting, not police, not security. Internal, the kind of internal that only large companies maintain for situations that can't be handled through normal channels. They were young, precise, expressionless, in the way of people trained to be unreadable, and they made eye contact with Marcus the moment he stepped through the door. "Mr. Ellison," the taller one said. "Walk with me," Marcus said. He didn't stop moving. They walked. Amara kept pace beside him, Isaiah on her hip, and she heard enough of the conversation to understand the shape of it without needing every word. "HR is already in contact. Legal has the footage." The union rep reached out within the hour. 47 media inquiries as of 20 minutes ago. The number landed in her stomach like something dropped from a height. 47, she said. The taller man glanced at her. Marcus looked over. "It's closer to 60 now," he said. She stopped walking. Just for a second. Just long enough for Marcus to notice. He put a hand lightly at the small of her back, not pushing, not steering. Just there. "Keep moving," he said quietly. "We'll get somewhere private and talk." "Marcus, this was supposed to be, I know what it was supposed to be." His voice was even, not cold, even. "It became something else. That's not your fault, and it's not a problem we can't handle." He looked at her. "But we need to get out of this corridor first." She started walking again. Behind them, 40 rows of economy class were filing into the same terminal. And somewhere in that stream, moving with the deliberate, careful pace of someone trying not to draw attention to themselves and failing entirely because people had seen the video. Because the video had a face and the face was her face. Claire Ramsey walked into the airport and directly into the hardest moment of her life. She saw them before they saw her. Or rather, she saw the two men in suits flanking Marcus and understood immediately that they were not there for the Ellisons. They were there about her. The distinction mattered in a way she felt physically in her shoulders in the place below her ribs where dread lives. She slowed. One of the suited men turned around, looked directly at her, said nothing. She didn't run. She would give herself that afterward. She didn't run. She walked toward them with her chin at the same angle it had always been, at the angle that 11 years had carved into her, as surely as any habit, that particular tilt of self-possession that had always felt like dignity and now felt like the most expensive costume she'd ever worn. "Ms. Ramsey," the man said. "Yes," she said. "If you'll come with us, please." She came with them. She did not look at Amar. She told herself afterward that it was dignity, that refusal to look. But in the quiet of later nights, she would know it for what it was. She couldn't look because looking would have made it real in a way that nothing else, not the phone call, not the suspension, not the suits had made it yet. She walked past and was gone. Amara watched her go. Not with triumph, not with the satisfaction she might have expected. She watched Claire Ramsey walk away flanked by two company representatives, her back ruler straight and her hands betraying her at her sides. And what she felt was something older and quieter than vindication. Something that had more grief in it than she'd anticipated. Not for Claire, for what Claire represented. For every version of that moment she had survived before this one, and in rooms that didn't have cameras, on days when no one was watching, when the only witness to someone's smallness toward her was herself. "You okay?" Marcus said. "Yeah," she said, and she meant it, which surprised her. She shifted Isaiah to her other hip and walked forward. The car was waiting outside the terminal. Not a town car, something quieter than that. Marcus preferred quiet. He opened the door himself, and she got in and buckled Isaiah into the infant seat that was already installed because Marcus had arranged it before the flight, because he was a man who arranged things in advance and never mentioned that he'd done it. She had been with him long enough to know that was its own language, a language of presence, of showing up before you were asked. She looked at the side of his face as the car pulled away. "Thank you," she said. He glanced at her. "For what?" "For coming." He held her gaze for a moment, then looked back at the window. "You don't have to thank me for that." "I know," she said. "I'm doing it anyway." The driver took them to the hotel. First, Marcus had arranged rooms, of course, because the wedding wasn't until 4 and there were 3 hours to fill, and a child who needed to be changed and fed and put down for a real sleep in a real crib, and a woman who needed 20 minutes alone in a bathroom to stand under hot water and remember who she was outside of all of this. She got her 20 minutes. She stood in the shower until the water ran lukewarm, and she had processed enough of the morning to carry the rest of it forward. The slap, The silence, the applause. Marcus's hand over hers. Gerald's card. Constance's words. The number on Priya's phone. 60,000. 200,000. 480. She turned off the water. She stood in front of the mirror and looked at herself. Her cheek had faded, no visible mark. The impact had been sharp, but not the kind that left a record on skin. It had left its record elsewhere. In her chest, in the part of her that always kept score, not to be vengeful, but to be honest. To know what things cost. To know what she'd paid and what she was owed and what she would choose to collect and what she would choose to put down. She got dressed, put on the dress she'd brought for this dark green, structured at the shoulder, the kind of dress that entered a room before you did. She had chosen it deliberately. She had stood in her closet 2 nights ago and thought about what she wanted to feel when she walked through those church doors, and she had pulled this dress from the back of the rack and known immediately. Ready. That was what she wanted to feel. She picked up Isaiah, who had eaten and been changed by Marcus while she showered. She hadn't asked, he'd simply done it, and the 3 of them stood in the hotel room for a moment together. Isaiah was in the brown bear onesie, still alert now, looking back and forth between his parents with the attentive curiosity of a child taking inventory of the people responsible for his world. "You look," Marcus said, looking at her like someone who was about to close a door. She almost smiled. "That's the goal." "Then let's go." They arrived at the church at 3:52. Amara had not told anyone she was coming. Not David, not his mother, whom she had once genuinely liked, not the mutual friends who had split loyalties like continental plates after the breakup and settled into separate orbits that occasionally and awkwardly intersected at other people's events. She had bought a ticket to the wedding online. David's family was prominent enough that their wedding had a public RSVP portal which said something about the world, and she had listed herself as a Jackson +1, and that was all. She had not thought about what David's face would do when he saw her. She was thinking about it now. The church steps were crowded with arrivals, women in their best dresses, men with fresh haircuts and uncertain postures, children being adjusted and admonished and held. The particular social weather of a wedding, festive but slightly pressurized the way all ceremonies are when they mark something real and irreversible. A woman saw Amara first. Diana, David's cousin, 28, the family's unofficial social intelligence network, was standing near the top of the steps when Amara came up the walkway with Marcus beside her and Isaiah on her chest. Diana's face went through a sequence that would have been funny under different circumstances. Recognition, calculation, something that was almost respect, but was fighting hard against something else. She came down 3 steps. Amara. The name came out of her mouth like a question dressed as a greeting. Diana. Amara smiled at her. Not warmly, but correctly. "You look beautiful." Diana looked at Marcus, at Isaiah, at the dress, at Amara's face for any sign of something she could use or diffuse. Found nothing she knew how to handle. "David didn't mention," she started. "It was a surprise," Amara said pleasantly and walked up the steps. Diana stood at the bottom and watched them go. Inside, the church was full and buzzing. People who knew Amara from before, from the David years, turned heads in the particular way that people turn heads when something arrives that wasn't on the program. She felt it. Every turned head, every lowered voice, every elbow to ribs nudge between people who thought they were being subtle. She kept walking. She found a pew halfway down on the left side and sat. Marcus sat beside her, Isaiah overwhelmed by the ceiling and the flowers, and the sound of a string quartet tuning went wide-eyed and almost perfectly still, which was how he processed big things, by going quiet and watching, which Amara thought he had probably learned from his father. A woman in the pew ahead turned around. Monica, one of David's work friends. She had always been kind to Amara in the specific way that some people are kind to others, thoroughly, warmly, with the slight edge of someone who is always slightly surprised you're still standing. "Amara," Monica's eyes were wide. "You're here." "I'm here." Monica's eyes moved to Marcus. She knew the name. Everyone in certain circles knew the name, and the recognition moved across her face the way it always did, that 2-beat delay between hearing and understanding. "Is that my husband?" Amara said. "Marcus, this is Monica." "Nice to meet you," Marcus said. Completely even, completely present. Monica opened her mouth, closed, it turned back around. Amara felt Marcus's shoulder press lightly against hers. Not a word, just contact. The music shifted. The doors at the back of the church opened, and David Renner walked in. He was with his groomsmen, 4 of them lined up at the front, and he was standing at the end of the line, looking at the floor the way grooms do when they are waiting and feeling the full weight of what they've committed themselves to. He was 34 now, slightly broader in the shoulders than she remembered. His hair was shorter. He was not looking at the pews. Then he was. She didn't look away. She had decided that before she came. She wasn't going to look at the floor or pretend to read the program or make it easier for either of them. She was going to look at him the way you look at something you've finished with. Not with anger, not with longing, but with the clear, unburdened gaze of someone who has packed that particular room completely and locked the door behind them. She looked at him. He saw her. The color went out of his face in a way that had nothing to do with nerves about the wedding. His mouth opened, closed. He looked at Marcus, back at Amara, at Isaiah, back at Amara, his best man. Terrence, 36, the kind of man who handled crises with the reflexive competence of someone who had watched too many things go sideways, leaned in and said something in David's ear. David didn't move. He was still looking at her. She gave him a small nod. Not cold, not warm. Acknowledgement. I see you. I'm here. This is what healed looks like. Then she looked back down at Isaiah. David turned back to face the altar. His shoulders were rigid for the first 15 seconds. Then slowly they lowered. Terrence shot Amara one sharp look across the aisle. She met it without expression, and he looked away. The wedding began. She had not expected it to be beautiful. She had not let herself anticipate beauty, because beauty would have made it complicated in the ways she was trying not to be complicated. But the music was genuinely lovely, and the woman David was marrying, her name was Sophie, 29, a landscape architect from Connecticut, walked down the aisle with the kind of real, undisguised joy that you cannot manufacture, even on the day you most want to. She was lit from inside by the occasion. Amara looked at her and felt something unexpected, something she might have been ashamed of feeling if it had been anything other than what it was. She felt glad for her, not for David, for Sophie, who had gotten a whole, uncomplicated version of him, who had never been told she was too much, who would never have to stand in a shower counting down from 12 because a man had looked at her realness and called it a burden. Good for you, Amara thought, and meant it completely. Marcus turned his head and looked at her. She looked back. You okay? He mouthed. She nodded. He reached over, found her hand, held it. They sat like that through the vows, his hand over hers. Isaiah watching the ceiling with focused wonder. The voices at the altar making their promises into the air of a church full of witnesses. Amara listened to the words, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, to be honest and to be present. She thought about the morning, the slap, the silence, the way she had turned her head back. She thought about the video, the number that kept climbing on a phone she hadn't touched. She thought about what Marcus had said in the cabin. All you did was refuse to disappear. She thought about her mother who had told her when she was 7 years old, standing in a school hallway after a hard day, that the most dangerous thing a woman could do to the people who wanted to diminish her was to remain exactly and completely herself in front of them. They can't take what they can't make you give up, her mother had said. She had held that sentence for 27 years. The priest said, you may kiss the bride. The church applauded. Amar's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Then she looked. It was Denise, her closest friend, the one who would have grabbed her shoulders and said, baby, what is wrong with you? The message was in all capitals, which was how Denise communicated anything above a low simmer. Amara Jackson, I am watching your video on the news right now. The actual news. Are you alive? Call me. Also, who is that man and why is he perfect? Also, your baby is beautiful. Also, call me right now. Amara stared at the message. The news. Not just social media. Not just the comment thread on Priya's video. The actual news. She turned to Marcus, showed him the screen. He read it, looked at her, said nothing for a moment. It's moved, he said. Yes. Are you ready for that? She looked down at Isaiah, who had fallen asleep again, in the way only infants can sleep suddenly, completely, as if someone had simply turned off his lights. She looked at the pew around her. The wedding still happening in front of them, David and Sophie turning from the altar as husband and wife for the very first time, walking back down the aisle through their applauding future. She thought about doors, about the one she had come here to close and the one she hadn't known was opening. I don't know, she said honestly, but I don't think it matters whether I'm ready. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said very quietly, no, I don't think it does either. The recessional music swelled. The doors at the back of the church opened into the afternoon. And as the congregation rose around them, as David and Sophie moved through the light, as Isaiah slept against his mother's chest, in the middle of all of it, Amara Jackson sat still for one more second. She let the door close. She felt it close. Clean, final, not violent, the way it should have closed years ago if she'd been ready then. But she hadn't been ready then, and she was ready now. And that was the difference between a wound and a scar. One was still happening, and the other was evidence of what you had survived. She stood. She took her husband's hand. She walked out of the church and into whatever came next. Her phone buzzed again, and again, and again. She didn't look at it yet. She had all the time in the world for what came next. She had just run out of time for what came before. The first thing Amara did when they got back to the hotel was call Denise. Not because Denise demanded it, though she had 3 more times by text and once by voicemail. That was mostly just her name said in ascending volumes. But because Denise was the kind of person who held your history for you when you couldn't carry it yourself, and right now Amara needed someone who had known her before Marcus, before Isaiah, before the video, before any of it. Someone who had known her when she was 26 and broke and building herself back up from a job loss and a bad breakup with nothing but stubbornness and her mother's voice in her head. Denise picked up on the first ring. Tell me everything, she said. No hello, no preamble. Amara sat on the edge of the hotel bed. Isaiah was in the portable crib, already Marcus beside him, one hand resting on the rail the way he stood beside things he was protecting without making a production of it. She watched them and felt a tight thing in her chest loosen another degree. It was a flight attendant, Amara said. I know what she did, Denise said. I watched it 4 times. I need to hear it from you. So Amara told her. All of it. Claire's voice. The words she'd chosen. The sound the slap made in the silence of the cabin. The way she'd turned her head back. The way Marcus had said, step back in that voice that had no temperature in it at all and was somehow the most absolute thing in the room. She told it plainly without performance, the way she always told Denise things because Denise didn't need it dressed up and wouldn't accept it dressed down. When she finished, Denise was quiet for 3 full seconds. You know what kills me, Denise said. What? You didn't even raise your voice. No, not once. No, Mara. Denise's voice broke slightly on the second syllable. Just slightly, like a hairline crack in something solid. Do you understand what you did? Do you understand what people are saying out there right now? Marcus showed me the numbers, Amara said. I saw the message about the news. It's not just the news, it's every news. It's trending in 6 countries. 6 Amara. There are women posting videos of themselves saying your name like it's a complete sentence, like Amara Jackson means something they've been trying to say for years. Denise stopped, gathered herself. Because it does. You know that, right? Amara looked at her hands, at the finger Isaiah always grabbed. I was just sitting in a seat. That's the whole point, Denise said fiercely. That's exactly the point. You were just sitting in your seat and someone decided that wasn't allowed. And you refused quietly, completely, with your baby in your arms. You refused to let her make you small. And 1 million people watched it and said, that's me. I know that feeling. I know what it costs to sit still and hold your ground when someone is trying to take the floor from under you. Amara pressed her lips together. 6 countries, baby, Denise said softly. Okay, Amara said. Okay. I hear you. She exhaled. I hear you. Marcus looked over from the crib. She met his eyes. He gave her nothing but presence, just that full, quiet attention that said, I'm here. You're not carrying this alone. She looked away before it made her cry because she had a rule about crying in hotel rooms that she'd made for herself at 26 and had never fully rescinded. How was the wedding? Denise asked, and the shift in her tone was delicate, a good friend's pivot checking the other wound. It was fine, Amara said. He saw me. And nothing. He saw me. I saw him. I watched someone love him in front of a church full of people and I felt... She paused. I felt like it was over, actually completely over, like the last thread just dissolved. Denise made a sound, something warm and unsurprised. Good. Yeah. Was it worth going? Amara thought about this seriously the way she thought about things that deserve serious consideration. She thought about the dress she'd chosen, the way she looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, the way Isaiah had grabbed her finger in the pew, and the way Marcus's hand had come over hers during the vows, and the way she'd felt that door, that specific 4-year-old door, close inside her chest, without drama, without fanfare, without the ceremony she'd half expected. Yes, she said, it was worth going. Okay, Denise said. Good. Now deal with the other thing because the other thing is not going away. The other thing had in the time it took Amara to have this phone call grown by another 300,000 views. Marcus's PR team, a small efficient operation run by a woman named Lydia, who communicated exclusively in calm, comprehensive bullet points and had the emotional effect of someone who had professionally survived every possible version of a bad day, had sent a briefing to his phone during the call. He read it while Amara talked to Denise, and by the time she hung up, he had read it twice. Lydia wants to talk, he said. Of course she does. Tonight if possible. Tell me what it says first. He looked at her steadily. The video is at 1.2 million views. CNN has reached out. So has the Washington Post. 3 civil rights organizations have issued statements. The flight attendant's name has been confirmed by a leaked employee manifest that's not from us. Someone on the ground, and there's already a petition calling for permanent termination. 46,000 signatures in 3 hours. Amara sat with that. The airline has released a statement, Marcus continued. Standard. Regrets the incident investigation pending commitment to inclusive service. Meaningless at this point. What do you want to do? She asked. He put the phone down, looked at her directly. What do you want to do? She almost said, I don't know. She stopped herself because that wasn't quite true. She knew what she felt. She felt the weight of 1,200,000 people watching something that was hers, her face, her moment, her restraint, her pain, and making it theirs. She felt both seen and exposed in the way that big visibility always felt like standing in sunlight that was warmer than you'd expected, but brighter than you'd prepared for. She also felt something else, responsibility. Not the heavy obligatory kind, the chosen kind, the kind that arrives when you realize without asking for it that something you survived has become a door for someone else, a proof of concept, a demonstration that the floor can hold. I want to be careful, she said. I don't want this to become a circus. I don't want Claire Ramsey to become a symbol when she's just a person who did a terrible thing. And I don't, she stopped. I don't want Isaiah in any of this, not his face, not his name. Agreed. But I also, she pressed her hands together. I don't want to go quiet. I don't want to issue a polite statement and disappear. Because that's what happens. Someone does something, there's a moment there's noise, and then the person who was hurt goes quiet because that's what's expected of them. And everyone moves on, and nothing, her voice tightened, nothing actually changes. Marcus held her gaze for a long, steady moment. Then don't go quiet, he said. She looked at him. You know what you want to say, he said. You've always known. You just need the room to say it. She took a breath, let it out slowly, set up the call with Lydia. Lydia called at 9:15. She was crisp, prepared, and moved through her briefing the way a surgeon moves through a procedure, no wasted motion, no unnecessary commentary, all precision. She had drafted 3 options for Amar's response. Option 1, full media silence, legal only. Option 2, a single written statement, no interviews. Option 3, 1 interview controlled setting Amar's terms completely. Which networks? Amara asked. We'd recommend one of the major morning shows. The audience skews toward not a morning show, Amara said. Lydia paused. Okay. Something longer, something where I can actually say something instead of having 3 minutes between commercials to perform being okay. Another pause, shorter this time. Lydia recalibrating. There are a few options. A long-form journalist, someone with an established record of Patricia Wynn, Amara said. Silence. Marcus looked at her from across the room. Patricia Wynn was 61 years old, Black, and had been writing long-form narrative journalism for 30 years. She had interviewed presidents, movement leaders, grief-stricken parents, exonerated prisoners. She wrote about people the way people deserved to be written about from the inside out, with the full complexity of a human being intact. She did not simplify. She did not flatten. She did not ask, how did that make you feel, as if feelings were the point when the truth was the point. Patricia Wynn works for The Atlantic, Lydia said carefully. I know. She's not a TV get. I'm not looking for TV, Amara said. I'm looking for a record, something that exists after the clip stops circulating, something people can read in 6 months and still understand what happened. Lydia was quiet for 4 seconds, the longest she'd been quiet on the call. I'll reach out tonight. Thank you. The call ended. Marcus looked at her with the expression he wore when she surprised him, which was rare and which she had learned to recognize and treasure. It was subtle, a slight deepening of the attention already present in his face, like a room with good light getting a little more light. Patricia Wynn, he said, she's the right person. I know she is. A beat. I just didn't know you were. What does that mean? It means, he said, that 3 months ago you would have said you wanted the statement. Option 2, controlled minimal, preserve the quiet. She thought about that. Maybe. Not maybe. She picked at a thread on the bedspread. People change. People clarify, he said. It's different. She looked up at him. Is it? Changing implies you were something else. Clarifying means you were always this, you just hadn't had the right pressure to make it visible. She held his gaze. He was right. She knew he was right. She had felt the clarification happening for months since Isaiah was born, since she had looked at her son's face for the first time and understood that the things she tolerated in the world before him were things she could no longer afford to tolerate because he was watching, because he would learn from her what the world required of him, because the posture she chose now was the posture he would inherit. She had chosen to sit in her seat. She had chosen to turn her head back. She had chosen Patricia Wynn. These were not accidents. They were the shape of someone who had finally gotten clear. Isaiah made a sound from the crib, small, contented, the sound of a child deep in the good part of sleep. She stood and went to him, stood over the crib and watched him breathe for a moment, the way parents do that specific, slightly helpless vigil that has no purpose except love. He's going to be so confused when he's old enough to understand this day, she said. Marcus came to stand beside her. When he's old enough to understand it, he said he's going to know his mother sat still in the hardest moment and didn't break. She didn't say anything. That's not a small inheritance, Marcus said. She blinked, pressed her lips together, kept the 12 minutes at bay. 1. The next morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Fast because the world had not paused overnight. The video was at 2.7 million. Patricia Wynn had responded to Lydia at 11:42 p.m. with 3 words, I'm available. Call me. And slow because Isaiah woke at 5:30 with the cheerful, non-negotiable energy of an infant who had slept 10 hours and was ready to receive the world in full. Amara fed him, changed him, sat with him in the armchair by the window in the gray early light while Marcus slept another hour because Marcus never slept enough, and she had made it a quiet project to protect those extra hours wherever she could. She sat with Isaiah and her phone and let herself look at it. She had been avoiding the comments. She knew better in theory the internet was not a place for the unguarded, but she had always been someone who needed to know what was real, who couldn't function on filtered information, who would rather take the hit of a hard truth than the slow erosion of not knowing. She opened the thread. There were hundreds of thousands of comments. She didn't read them all. She read the ones that floated to the surface, the ones the algorithm had decided represented the shape of the thing. I have a 6-month-old. I have been talked to exactly like that in airports, in restaurants, in waiting rooms. I have been made to feel like my presence was an inconvenience. I have never once handled it with that kind of grace. She is everything I am trying to be. My grandmother said this is what dignity looks like. She said she knows that face. She said that face is ancient and she is glad to still see it. I showed this to my teenage daughter. She watched it 3 times without speaking. Then she said she never got small. I don't know if I've ever been more proud of anything my daughter has noticed. Amara stopped reading there. She looked at Isaiah, who was watching her face with his full, uncomplicated attention. She never got small, she said quietly. He grabbed her finger. She closed the app. At 9 a.m., she called Patricia Wynn herself. Lydia had offered to handle the logistics, but this felt like a conversation that should begin person to person. Patricia Wynn answered on the second ring with a voice that was warm and direct and did not waste its first seconds. Amara Jackson. Ms. Wynn. Patricia, please. A brief pause. I've been watching the video since yesterday afternoon. I want to tell you something before we discuss logistics, if that's all right. Go ahead. I've been doing this for 30 years, Patricia said. I've covered stories about moments about the single instant that crystallizes something that's been happening for a long time. And what I saw in that clip in your face and your stillness is that's not just a story about an airport. That's a story about what it costs a woman to remain herself in a world that keeps pricing her out of that right. And I want to tell it the way it deserves to be told, all of it, not just the cabin. Amara was quiet for a moment. What does all of it mean to you? She asked carefully. It means the before, Patricia said. The years. The things that make a woman arrive at that particular stillness. It means the man beside you and what that partnership looks like from the inside. It means your son and what you want him to inherit. It means Claire Ramsey and what we do with people who do what she did, not just the punishment, but the why. Amara listened to all of it, felt the shape of it, turned it over. I won't expose my son, she said. Understood. And I won't reduce Marcus to a plot device. He's a full person, not a reveal. Agreed. And I need final review of anything that involves my family before it publishes. That's not standard. I know it's not standard, Amara said, and I'm asking anyway. A pause shorter than she expected. Agreed, Patricia said. Amara exhaled. Then let's talk. They talked for 40 minutes, not the interview, just the conversation before the interview. The calibration, the mutual understanding of what they were building together and what it was for. By the end of it, Amara felt something she hadn't expected to feel, not just readiness, but trust. The specific earned trust that comes from watching someone treat a serious thing seriously. She ended the call and sat for a moment. Marcus appeared from the bedroom doorway, hair undone, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, holding Isaiah, who was chewing on his own fist with focused concentration. He looked like a man who had been awake for 10 minutes and had already collected the most important thing in the room. How'd it go? He said. Good, Amara said. She's the right person. I know. You haven't even talked to her. You chose her, he said simply. That's enough. She looked at him standing there, this man who had agreed in 4 seconds to walk into her ex-boyfriend's wedding, who had said step back in a cabin at 30,000 feet, who had arranged the car seat in the crib in the hour of extra sleep and had not once in 2 years made her feel like the complicated parts of her life were a burden on the uncomplicated parts of his. Marcus, she said, yeah, I love you. He looked at her for a moment, the full unhurried weight of it. Then he walked across the room and handed her Isaiah, and the baby transferred from his arms to hers, with the fluid ease of a child who understood on a cellular level that both of these people were the same safe place. I know, Marcus said. She would have thrown something at him for that, except that he was smiling that rare private smile that she had never once seen in a photograph and had never seen him give to a room, and was entirely specifically hers. The smile that said, I know and I love you too, and I'm not going to make a speech about it. She almost did cry then. Almost. Her phone rang. She looked at it, unknown number. Area code she didn't recognize. She almost let it go, and then something, some instinct she couldn't name made her answer. Hello. A pause, then a voice she hadn't heard in 4 years. A voice she had not expected to hear today, of all days. A voice that had once sat across from her over coffee and used the word complicated like it was a verdict. Amara. David Renner said her name like a man walking carefully over uncertain ground. I know this is... He stopped. Tried again. I saw the video. She said nothing. I've been trying to decide whether to call since last night, he said. Sophie, my wife. A small, strange pause at the word. She told me I should. She said... He stopped again. What did she say? Amara asked. Her voice was perfectly level. She said that if I had ever treated you the way that woman on the plane did not, the hitting, but the... He exhaled. The deciding you weren't worth full respect. She said if I had ever done that, I owed you a phone call. A pause. She's a good person. She seems like it, Amara said. I'm not calling to relitigate anything, he said quickly. I don't have an agenda. The line was quiet for a moment. I used the word complicated once, about you, about your life, and I said it like it was a flaw. I remember. I've thought about it since, more than I probably should have. His voice had something in it, not guilt exactly, something older than guilt, regret that had been properly aged. You weren't complicated. You were just more than I knew how to hold, and I made that your problem instead of mine. Amara sat with that for a moment. In her arms, Isaiah had fallen asleep again, just like that. Dropped off mid-fist chew, absolutely unconscious, entirely, trusting that the arms holding him would still be there when he woke up. David, she said. Yeah. Thank you for calling. A pause. That's all. That's everything, she said. Really, thank you. She ended the call. Marcus was watching her from across the room. She looked at him. David, she said. He held her gaze. You okay? More than I expected to be, she said. And that she understood, as she said, it was the truest thing about the last 24 hours. More had happened than she had expected. More had hurt than she had prepared for, and more had healed than she had planned. She had gotten on a plane to close one door and had inadvertently walked through three others, one marked grace under pressure, one marked who you are when it costs you something, and one the one she hadn't seen coming, marked what it looks like when you finally stop managing your own life small. She looked down at her sleeping son. She thought about the woman in the comment thread. She never got small. She thought about her mother's voice in a school hallway. They can't take what they can't make you give up. She thought about Patricia Wynn saying all of it. The before, the years, the cost. She thought about Marcus's 4 seconds. She looked up. Lydia's going to want to brief us before the interview, she said. Tonight, tomorrow morning, early. I'll set it up. And I need to call my mother. She's been calling since yesterday. I know. Amara looked at the ceiling for 1 second. She's going to cry. She's going to cry, and then she's going to say something that makes you cry, and then she's going to tell you she always knew. Amara laughed, actually laughed short, real slightly wet at the edges. She always says she always knew, and she's always right. Don't tell her that. I tell her that every time I see her, Marcus said, and the private smile came back. She shook her head, pressed her lips to Isaiah's forehead. 1, 2. She called her mother. Her mother answered on the first ring, and before Amara could say a single word, her mother said, I always knew. Her mother cried for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds before she stopped and said, with the precision of a woman who had spent 40 years loving a daughter through every hard thing, tell me what you need. That was the thing about her mother. She cried first, and then she got practical. She had always been that way. The tears were real. They were full. She didn't apologize for them or rush through them. But once they were done, she came back to the surface with both hands ready. I need you to not talk to anyone, Amara said. Not the neighbors, not Aunt Gloria, nobody. Gloria already called. Mama. I didn't tell her anything. I said you were fine and hung up. Good. She called back. Mama. I let it go to voicemail. A pause. She left 11 minutes, single message. 11 minutes, Amara. Amara pressed her free hand over her eyes and felt something that was both exhaustion and love in equal measure. Do not call her back. I won't. Her mother's voice softened. Baby. Yeah. I watched it 6 times. I know. The way you turned your head back. Her mother stopped. Started again. I know that turn. I know where that comes from. I taught you that turn. Amar's throat tightened. I know you did. I taught you that because I had to learn it myself and nobody taught me. I had to find it on my own in the middle of a room with no witnesses, and I never wanted you to have to find it that way. Her mother's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something that had been carrying weight for a long time and was finally being set down in the right place. And you found it. You already had it. I just pointed you toward it. You did more than that, Amara said. Hush, not dismissive. The kind of hush that means I need you to let me finish. That man sitting next to you. Marcus? I know his name. I've met him 7 times. I'm asking about him in that cabin. The way he sat there, the way he did, you see his face when it happened, when she... I didn't look at him right away. I did, her mother said. On the video, I watched his face. Another pause. The kind her mother used when she was choosing the exact right words. That man did not move. He did not perform. He did not stand up and make himself the center of it. He sat there and he watched you handle it, and the only thing on his face was it was like watching someone be proud of something they didn't make. Something that was already made when they found it. Amara couldn't speak for a moment. That's a man who knows what he has, her mother said simply. That's a man who isn't afraid of it. Amara looked across the room at Marcus, who was reading something on his phone, with his feet on the coffee table, Isaiah asleep in the crook of his arm, like the world was a simple and excellent place to be. Yeah, she said, he is. Her mother exhaled. Long. The exhale of a woman releasing something she'd been holding. The interview, she said, with the writer. Patricia Wynn. Good choice. You know her work. I've been reading Patricia Wynn for 20 years. She doesn't flatten people. A beat. Don't let them flatten you. You tell it the whole way or you don't tell it. No performing okay. No wrapping it in a bow so people feel comfortable. I know. Say it back to me. Amara almost smiled. No performing okay. No wrapping it in a bow. Good girl. A small pause. I love you. I love you, Mama. Tell my grandson I said so. He's asleep. Tell him anyway, he hears more than you think. She ended the call and sat for a moment with the phone in her hand. The room was quiet in the specific way that hotel rooms are quiet at night, that seals slightly pressurized quiet, that makes everything inside it feel separate from the rest of the world. She was grateful for it. She needed the separation. She needed the border between this room and the 2.7 million people outside it. Marcus looked over. Good, she said. She says she always knew. She said she always knew. He nodded completely unsurprised and went back to his phone. The briefing with Lydia happened at 7 the next morning over a conference call that included Lydia, the airline's newly appointed communications director, and Gerald Hartman, who had called Marcus at 6 a.m. to say that he would be providing a formal witness statement to the airline, and if necessary to any legal proceedings, and that he wanted to loop in on any media strategy to ensure it was legally sound. Amara had not expected Gerald. She said so. I gave you my card, Gerald said simply. I meant what was on it. Lydia moved through her briefing efficiently. The airline had issued a second statement, this one more substantive, more specific. It named the incident directly. It confirmed that Claire Ramsey had been terminated, not suspended pending investigation. Terminated. The room on the conference call went quiet when Lydia said it. Terminated, Amara repeated. As of this morning, Lydia confirmed, the union filed a grievance within the hour, which is standard. But the footage in the witness accounts where there was no tenable alternative position. I see. Amara sat with that. She had expected it logically. She had not been prepared emotionally for how it would land. Not with grief, she was clear about that. What had been done to her was real and had a name and deserved consequences. But with weight. With the specific gravity of a consequence that was now permanent, that had closed a door the same way doors had been closing all around her in the last 2 days. The door on Claire Ramsey's 11 years. The door on David. The door on the woman she'd been before Isaiah. All these doors. The media inquiries are now at 312, Lydia said. So, the Washington Post has moved to a front-page web story. There will be a piece by end of day, regardless of whether Amara speaks to anyone. Then it's good we have Patricia Wynn, Marcus said. The piece will take Trepetrum, Lydia said. It won't publish for at least a week, possibly 2. We need a bridge statement for today. Something that lets the story develop correctly, that frames Amara as a person, not just a moment. She speaks for herself, Marcus said. Of course, Lydia said quickly. I'm suggesting she speak for herself in writing. A short statement. Her words, not ours. Something that, I'll write it, Amara said. A pause on the call. You want to write it yourself, Lydia said. I'll write it, Amara said again. Give me an hour. She wrote it in 45 minutes at the small desk by the window, while Marcus took Isaiah down to the lobby for 20 minutes so the room could be quiet. She had never been a person who needed to be talked into her own words. She had always known what she thought and been willing to say it in the language it deserved. What took the 45 minutes was not the finding of the words, it was the honoring of them. Making sure each one did exactly what it was supposed to do and nothing extra. She wrote it by hand first on hotel stationery, then typed it on her phone. It was 3 paragraphs. The first paragraph said what happened plainly without adornment. It did not perform injury and it did not minimize it. It named the slap. It named the words. It said, I was sitting with my son and a woman decided that I had not earned the space I was occupying, and she acted on that decision in a way that I want to be very clear was not surprising to me in the way it might have been to others. I have lived in my body for 33 years. I know what it looks like when someone has already decided who I am before they reach me. The second paragraph said what she did and why. I did not scream. I did not I turned my head back and I held my ground because the alternative, becoming small, becoming quiet, becoming the things she needed me to be in order to justify what she had done, was not available to me. Not because I am remarkable, because I am tired, because women have been getting tired in that particular way for a long time, and the only thing we've ever been able to do with that tiredness is carry it forward into the next room with our heads at the right angle. The third paragraph said what she wanted it to mean. I am not a symbol. I am a mother and a wife and a woman who sat in a seat and refused to be moved. If that means something to you, it's because it means something to you, because you have sat in your own seat, in your own cabin, at your own altitude, and held your own ground in ways no camera caught. I see you, that's all. I just want you to know I see you. She read it back once, sent it to Lydia without asking anyone's opinion. Lydia read it and said in the flattest, most professional voice possible, "This is the best thing I've received in 14 years of doing this." The statement went up at 10:15 a.m. By noon, it had been shared 600,000 times. By 2 p.m., it had been quoted in 47 news articles in 12 countries. By 4 p.m., a senator from Georgia had read the second paragraph aloud on the floor of the United States Senate as part of a speech on workplace discrimination and the inadequacy of existing protections for passengers on domestic flights. Amara found out about this from Denise, who sent a voice note that was 30 seconds of pure screaming, followed by the words, "I am on the floor." On the floor. Amara listened to it twice. Then she sat very still for a moment with her phone in her lap and thought about her mother's voice. They can't take what they can't make you give up. She thought about herself at 26 alone in a car, at a gas station in the rain, keeping her grief to 12 minutes because she had somewhere to be. She thought about Isaiah's fingers around hers. She thought about this. She had not gone to the airport to make a statement. She had gone to close a door. She had not gotten on the plane to be seen. She had gotten on the plane to move forward. She had not written 3 paragraphs to change the world. She had written them to say the true thing in the true way and let other people decide what to do with it. That was the thing no one talked about. The accidental nature of becoming something to people. The way a moment that belonged entirely to you, your body, your cheek, your baby, your stillness could crack open in the light and become a mirror for a million people to look into. She hadn't asked for the mirror. She had just refused to shatter. Marcus came in from the other room and looked at her face. "Senator," she said. He blinked. "Which one, Ellison?" "Georgia, Georgia." He sat down on the bed, looked at his hands, looked at her. "How do you feel?" "Like something got very big very fast and I'm trying to stay the same size inside it." He nodded. "That's the right instinct." "Is it working?" "You're sitting in a hotel room in Connecticut," he said. "You're not on a stage. You're not performing anything. You wrote what was true and sent it, and now you're sitting here asking how you feel." A pause. "Yeah, it's working," she exhaled. "Patricia called," he said. "She wants to move the interview up. Not pressure. She said she wants it to get ahead of the narrative before it gets too far ahead of you." She said. He paused and something in his expression shifted slightly. Not alarm. Careful. She said there are other voices emerging. People who knew Claire Ramsey, former colleagues, and someone. He stopped. "What?" Amara said. "Someone who says they have documentation of previous incidents. Other passengers, other complaints that were filed and dismissed." The room went very quiet. "How many, Bama?" Amara said. Patricia didn't give a number. She said it's still being verified. Amara looked at the ceiling for a moment, then looked back down. "So I wasn't the first." Marcus said nothing. "She did this before," Amara said, not a question. The specific, sick clarity of a truth arriving that you had almost expected but had hoped not to find. and someone decided it wasn't enough to act on. We don't know the full picture yet. Marcus, he held her gaze. We don't know how many, we don't know when, we don't know who saw the complaints and made the call to dismiss them. A pause. But yes, there appears to have been a pattern. She stood up. Not dramatically, not in anger. She stood up the way you stand up when you've been sitting with something and you realize sitting is no longer the right posture for it. She walked to the window, stood with her back to the room for 5 seconds. Call Patricia, she said. Tell her tomorrow. First thing. Are you sure? She turned back. If there are other women, if there are other moments that got filed away and forgotten because no one was watching, then this isn't just about me. It was never just about me. Her voice was level, not cold, resolved. I'm not going to be the story that made it about one day and one woman and one viral video. I'm going to be the story that made it about the pattern. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll call Patricia. He stood. And Amara. Yeah. When this is over, he said, when the article is published and the noise dies down and Isaiah goes back to chewing on his fist, you're like a man with important business to attend to. I'm taking you somewhere quiet. No phones, no Lydia, just us. She almost laughed. Where? Somewhere with a good horizon, he said. That's all I have so far. That's enough, she said. Patricia Wynn arrived at the hotel at 9 the next morning with a recorder, a notebook, and the particular quality of attention that Amara had heard about, but hadn't fully prepared for the kind that made you feel within the first 3 minutes that she had already done her homework, already understood the shape of the thing, and was here not to discover what happened, but to understand what it cost. They sat across from each other at the small table by the window. Coffee between them, Marcus in the other room with Isaiah, the door slightly open in the way of a man who was nearby without being present. Patricia said, "Tell me about the version of you that existed before that flight." Amara looked at her. "That's not where most people start." "I know," Patricia said. "That's why I'm starting there." So Amara told her she started at 26. She started at the gas station in the rain. The 12 minutes, the job she'd lost, the self she'd had to rebuild from the studs. She told her about David, not all of it, but the part that mattered, the word he'd chosen, the way she'd packed in 4 days, the way she'd learned slowly over the following years to stop treating the hard parts of herself like a liability. She told her about meeting Marcus, which had not been a love story. In the conventional sense, it had been a slow mutual recognition. Two people who had each separately gotten very clear about what they needed and found themselves in the same room at the same time actually able to say it. She told her about Isaiah, about the terror of the test in Marcus's kitchen, about Marcus's face, about the first time she'd held her son and understood that every door she'd ever walked through, the painful ones, the costly ones, the ones that had left marks, had led her here to this weight, to this grip. And then she told her about the flight. Patricia did not interrupt once. When Amara finished, Patricia sat back and looked at her for a moment. "Can I tell you what I see?" Patricia said. "Glenn, go ahead." "I see a woman who has spent 33 years learning to be exactly herself in rooms that kept trying to price her out of that. And I see that the moment on that plane, as violent and as real as it was not the story. It was the evidence of the story." She paused. "The story is what you built. The story is how you got to be someone who could turn her head back." Amara held her gaze. "I want to write that," Patricia said. "The full arc, not just the clip." "That's why I called you," Amara said. The interview ran for 4 hours. By the end of it, Amara's voice was slightly hoarse, and she had said 3 things she hadn't planned to say and had not regretted a single one. That was the thing about Patricia Wynn. She made space for the truth to find its own room instead of forcing it into the shape of a narrative. She asked questions the way good doctors listen to symptoms without conclusion until the full picture arrived. When it was over, Marcus brought Isaiah out. The baby had been awake for the last hour and had apparently spent it pulling Marcus's collar and studying his own hands with the deep, scholarly concentration of a child who suspects he has discovered something. Patricia looked at Isaiah. Isaiah looked at Patricia. "Hi," Patricia said. Isaiah grabbed her offered finger, which he did with everyone because he was his father's son and understood that there was nothing wrong with accepting what was extended in good faith. Patricia laughed, a real one, short and surprised. "Strong grip. He gets it from his grandfather, Amara said, and then stopped because she hadn't meant to say that because her father had been gone for 8 years, and she had not expected him to arrive in this conversation. And yet there he was in her son's hands, in the grip that had held her father's enormous, warm, certain grip as a child, and had understood from it that the world could be held. Patricia noticed. She was Patricia Wynne. She noticed everything. "Tell me about him sometime," she said gently. "Not today, but sometime." "Maybe," Amara said. Patricia accepted maybe with the grace of a woman who knew the difference between a closed door and a door that wasn't ready yet. The article published 9 days later. It was titled, "She Never Got Small." Patricia had found the comment herself, had tracked down the woman who wrote it. A 30-year-old nurse in Detroit named Camille, who had left work after a double shift, opened her phone, watched a 12-second clip of a stranger's stillness, and had written what she saw because it was the most honest thing she had felt in a long time. Camille had cried when Patricia called her. "I just said what I saw," Camille said. "That's enough," Patricia told her. The article opened with Camille, with her double shift and her phone and the 12-second clip and the 4 words she'd typed into a comment thread on the floor of her apartment in Detroit at 11:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. And then it opened outward from Camille to Amara, from the clip to the cabin, from the cabin to the gas station in the rain, from the rain to the kitchen, test from the kitchen to the church, from the church to the hotel room. From the hotel room to this, a woman sitting across a table telling the full, costly, accurate story of how you become someone who can remain herself in the hardest moment. Amara read it the morning it published at the kitchen table at home, their kitchen, their home, the one with Isaiah's high chair and Marcus's newspaper, and her mother's photograph on the refrigerator, and the life that had been built quietly and deliberately and was improbably entirely hers. She read it twice. She set her phone face down on the table. Marcus came in, poured coffee, sat down. "Well, she got it right," Amara said. He picked up his own phone, read it, set it down. "Yeah," he said. "She did." Isaiah in the high chair slapped both hands on his tray at once, with the emphatic authority of a 7-month-old who had concluded that whatever the adults were doing, he approved of the atmosphere. Amara looked at him, looked at Marcus, looked at the window and the morning coming through it and the ordinary, extraordinary fact of this room with these people in it. The article was read by 4 million people in its first 48 hours. It prompted 3 congressional hearings on passenger rights and airline accountability. It led to a settlement for 2 other passengers who had previously filed complaints against Claire Ramsey, complaints that had been, as Patricia had confirmed, documented and dismissed. It was taught in a journalism ethics class at Northwestern. It was read aloud by a mother to her daughter in a hospital room in Atlanta, and the daughter saved it to her phone and years later read it to her own daughter and told her this is what it looks like when you carry yourself right. But none of that was what Amara thought about later when people asked her what it meant. What she thought about was this: the morning the article published, her mother called before Amara had even finished reading it and said, not, "I knew it," not, "I told you just, baby, I am so proud of you." And Amara, who had survived a slap at 30,000 feet and a 4-year-old door in a viral video, and a senator in a 9-day interview, in the particular terror of being seen by millions as the truest version of yourself, Amara, who had kept herself to 12 minutes in a car in the rain and never asked anyone to carry what she carried, pressed the phone to her ear and let herself cry. Not 12 minutes, longer than 12 minutes, as long as it took. Marcus put his hand over hers on the table, and she leaned into the weight of it and let herself feel all of it at once, the scene and the arrival, the doors and the rooms, the slap and the stillness, in the 6 countries and the grip of her son and the voice of her mother and the 4 seconds of a man who had said yes before she could finish asking. She had refused to disappear. She had turned her head back. She had written the true thing and let the world decide what to do with it. And here in a kitchen in the morning with coffee on the table, and her child's hands on his tray, and her husband's palm covering hers, Amara Jackson understood something she had been building toward her entire life without knowing it had a name. This was not the end of anything. This was what it felt like to be fully, finally, irreversibly arrived.